is going to be next
Well,
world
no, I think-
better, or do we need
yeah.
a complete collapse? Do we
No.
have to get to a Mad Max world before there might be change?
No, I think that you know, as I said at the beginning, this is the greatest kind of existential dilemma that we face, to confront the reality before us and yet not succumb to despair, and to resist in every way possible. I mean, we have built the most efficient security and surveillance state in human history. We're the most watched, photographed, spied upon, monitored human population, and I covered the Stasi state in East Germany. Our civil liberties have been taken from us by judicial fiat. Obama's assault on civil liberties have actually been worse than Bush. But if we don't react, if we continue to remain passive, then the trajectory that we're on will kill us. I mean, Obama's environmental policies are disastrous. He drills like Sarah Palin. He's opened up the Arctic, the Atlantic coast, public lands. We have no time left, and like many dying empires, we have squandered our resources, trillions of dollars in futile and endless wars. And all of those resources, not to mention the redirecting the scientific and technological work towards the war machine rather than, I mean, it's clear that within the power elite, they're not going to, any more than Ahab, they're not going to steer us towards a rational and a sane future. And of course, having covered war for as long as I did for 2 decades, I understand the poison of violence. I don't want to see us go there. And yet, we are already watching the rise of this nihilistic violence, especially in the Middle East. Those who have been cast aside by neoliberalism as sort of human refuse have morphed into ISIS and Boko Haram, and rising up out of the failed states that we created. So, you know, that is the struggle. The struggle is to face what's before us and not allow it to overwhelm us, so that we have, you know, we can continue to build movements to resist. I mean, it's all going to be movements. We're not, at this point, I think Sheldon Nolan is right. The system of inverted totalitarianism is, we've undergone what John Ralston calls a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion. And that's the struggle. I think Pollyannish kind of, you know, what this kind of mania for hope that is part of American culture is also, you know, a product of American infantilism. I mean, I was a war correspondent. If you had sort of very dreamy views about what was happening on the battlefield, you usually got killed. I mean, you have to make a very cold assessment of the weapon systems in front of you and then react. And I think we have to do the same. Years been teaching, primarily in Rahway, the maximum security prison in Rahway. And when you're inside the system, you realize how, if you're poor, primarily a poor person of color, how easy it is to get sucked into prison and never get out. Almost none of them ever go to trial, and 94% are forced to plea out. And if you don't plea out, they kind of punish you. So the students I have with the longest sentences are the ones who plea, because they have to make an example of them. I mean, it's just story after story. I mean, one of my students was arrested in Camden at the age of 14. He was in a gang. There was a knifing. He didn't do it, I'm fairly certain, but he was the one the police nabbed. They made him sign a confession. He was sentenced on the basis of that it was 2 in the morning. He was crying. He wanted to go home. They kept saying, sign this, sign you. They wouldn't allow his family in the room. And on the basis of that, he was sentenced at the age of 14 as an adult, and is not eligible to go before the parole board until he's 70 years old. There's a story after story like this. I mean, August Wilson got it. I mean, yeah, you've got gangbangers in there, but you also have the best, the most dignified, the most, intelligent, the most, and that's what kind of grips my heart out. I helped my students write a play a year ago that hopefully will be performed in New York next year, called Cage. I mean, we can go back to Marx. I mean, this is the reason we have 2.2 million people incarcerated, and the reason most of them are poor is because they're surplus labor. So on the streets of Camden or Newark, they don't generate any money, for the corporate state, which has moved all the jobs over to China or Vietnam. But if you put them in a cage, they generate $50,000 or $60,000 a year for the corporate state. And I think those on the outside keep saying the system doesn't work. They're wrong. The system works the way it's designed to work. It works exactly as it was designed to work. Although there's definitely a dialogue, I think the corporations are far more entrenched now. 1 million prisoners are working for for-profit corporations in prison in a form of neo-slavery. They make, in New Jersey, $1.30 a day for 8 hours of work. Chris Christie just had all of his office furniture refurbished in the Rahway workshop by slave labor. In states like Alabama, they don't even pay you. And you have prison contractors, not only in terms of building prisons, in terms of guards unions, but you've got money transfer companies now are privatized, commissaries are privatized, and prisoners are charged for everything. Like, you don't get shoes anymore in New Jersey. You have to pay $45 for Reeboks, but you're only making $28 a day a month in the prison. So you go into debt. So now we're seeing prisoners released thousands of dollars in debt. If they can't pay the debt and they can't get jobs, then they go right back in. So that's why when you see someone stop for their taillight and they run, it's not the taillight. It's that he couldn't pay the warrants. There are warrants out for him because he couldn't pay, and he runs and they shoot him in the back and kill him. The only way to break the back of the prison system, which is something I'm involved in, is to build massive nationwide work stoppages within the prisons, because these prisons are built on neo-slavery. We saw with 6-day stoppage in 3 prisons in Georgia in 2010, it cost the state millions of dollars because they had to bring in compensated labor. So that's what we're trying to do. There's a nationwide movement. Pelican Bay, there are all sorts of ripples of it. There was a sit-down strike in Rahway. But I love teaching them. In the last semester I taught Eduardo's Galeano. I taught a course called Conquest. So it was Open Veins of Latin America, Burying My Heart at Wounded Knee, and C.L.R. James's Black Jacobins. And this is the benefit of living in an illiterate culture. The prison authorities have never even heard of these books. I was in Montana. I'd given a